There's something about Usopp and Buggy. They both serve similar roles for Luffy and Shanks respectively, and of the OG Straw Hat crew, Usopp is the only one to have never been around Buggy D. Clown. Why is that? Well, I have no clue. I just feel like there's a connection between them. Something larger that Oda has been cooking up for a long time. It feels like it's right under my nose. Let's just look at the defining traits of these boys. Both have outright ridiculous schnozzes, both are liars and cowards, and both are largely comedic characters. Why are they so similar? Well, this connection has been gnawing at the back of my head for a while now, but I want to share with you the moment that pushed me into making this video. I won't be spoiling the context of the story around this moment, but spoiler alert for non-manga readers, or those not up to chapter 1082 during the Egghead Island arc, who don't want to know anything. Here, we find Buggy reflecting on his split from Shanks after Roger's execution. Looking at this scene, I can't help but feel a purposeful overlap between Luffy and Usopp's split at Water 7. It's clear that Buggy admires Shanks, but due to a misunderstanding of Shanks' motivations, Buggy is let down by his would-be captain and decides to run away from him, declaring Shanks an enemy. It's not a one-to-one with Luffy and Usopp, but I mean, even down to the rain, there's definitely a similar vibe going on. So why am I talking about this? Cool, two characters share some similarities, so what? Well, tenaciously curious viewer, nothing in One Piece is ever by accident. We know that there are echoes of past generations and events reoccurring in the present story. Why couldn't Buggy be part of that as well? Or, since we know where Shanks and Buggy's relationship went, is that hinting at a similar fate for Luffy and Usopp? Or, since Usopp and Luffy already resolved their conflict, will Usopp play some role in Buggy's reconciliation with Shanks? Let's not forget, of all the characters on the Straw Hats, aside from Luffy, Usopp has the most direct connection to Shanks through his father. Before speculating about what the future holds for these two characters, let me further emphasize their similarities outside of basic characteristics, so we really grasp their strange connection. Usopp and Buggy are both liars, whose lies have a nasty habit of shaping reality, often biting them in the ass in the process. Buggy's constant failure upward serves as a true inspiration for politicians and executives everywhere. Starting as a simple occupant of Orangetown, then slipping on a banana peel through the Grand Line to emperor status. Despite all his best efforts, he cannot lose the support of his passionate fans who will ascend him to godhood if they can. Does that sound familiar? Buggy's international clown show was replicated by Usopp in Dressrosa. He lied to the Tontada about being some brave hero, then ended up bloodied and beaten, yet ascended to godhood all the same. Usopp didn't even have a bounty before this day. Him going from 0 to the third highest on the whole crew is a Buggy-level jump in status. To be clear, Usopp actually does work for his fame, overcoming his cowardice far more often than the selfish Buggy. There are differences between the characters that will become more emphasized when they finally meet. These two characters are destined to come nose to nose. How could they not? Now that Buggy's leading the Cross Guild, and given his declaration in chapter 1082, there's no doubt he's going to be involved in the endgame. Likely having something to do with Shanks. If I had to guess, all the lingering Shanks plot points, including Yasopp, will be resolved in one arc, which means the greatest opportunity for Buggy and Usopp to meet would be in whatever upcoming arc that is. Likely Elbaf. Given that Buggy and Usopp's destined meeting is set to take place during an emotional roller coaster for each of them, will they learn anything from each other? How will that interaction go? What will the audience get out of it? Well, let's examine their differences to see if that teaches us anything. Buggy was a straight-up cartoon goon until impelled down. The only thing redeeming about him was his status as a total doofus. Not to say that things changed too much after that arc, but spending time with him as part of Luffy's makeshift crew, and in a protagonist-adjacent role, gave us a more well-rounded perspective. Buggy lies and runs at every opportunity he gets, and although he fails at nearly everything he tries, he ends the arc with a newfound position on the world stage, and a flock of admiring fans. Is there a similar situation we can compare to Usopp? I don't think you need to look any further than the Dressrosa example given before. Just like Buggy, Usopp finds himself leading a charge of die-hard fans, and by some absolute miracle, his plan succeeds. The difference between them is that Usopp was fighting for something other than himself. Even though he succeeded by accident, his initial attempt to win the day was spurred on by a selfless act of courage, rather than a selfish act of buffoonery paired with impeccable timing. Then there's Marineford. The entire time Buggy is acting exactly how you'd expect. He's cowardly and underhanded, without the courage or ability to follow through with his schemes to take down Whitebeard. But despite his idiocy and cowardice, he somehow manages to help. It wasn't on as grand of a scale, but Buggy's time during the Paramount War brings to mind Usopp in Alabasta. I'd say Enies Lobby, but he wasn't even there. Plus, a fellow Straw Hat's life was on the line. Buggy had no such motivation at Marineford. On the surface, Usopp acted in this conflict in much the same way Buggy did. He got his ass kicked and tried to run away in a situation where he was seemingly in way over his head. However, there's one turning point for Usopp that Buggy never had to face. His captain's dreams were laughed at. Like the flick of a switch, Usopp's attitude toward the battle changed. He was no longer fighting for his own survival, but for a friend he deeply admired. If the nose was on the other face, do you think if someone mocked Roger, Buggy would act differently? It's hard to say, but if we look at that scene in chapter 1082, the split between Buggy and Shanks comes when Buggy thinks Shanks is going against Roger's dream for him. So, what do you think he would do? The problem with comparing Buggy and Usopp is that Buggy hasn't really had it all on the line before. We've been with Usopp through dire situation after dire situation, but even in the world-shattering war at Marineford, Buggy barely cares what happens as long as he's safe. Sure, he tinkers with the idea of killing Whitebeard, but mostly he just shows off for a snail on the outskirts. He's never been in an emotionally compromised position, faced with a loved one in danger, or anything like that. So of course, there's no one-to-one comparison with Usopp's best moments, but I think I've shown that there is something between these two. So what does it all mean? Well, I already told you, I have no fucking idea. But now's the part of the video where we make some reckless, educated guesses. My simplistic monkey brain immediately goes to a fight. It's One Piece, so not much of a stretch. Ha! I'm picturing a moment where Shanks is in danger. Impossible to even fathom, but he does have those scars. And there's only one person who can save him. Buggy. Now, Buggy is a proud clown, so I think it's gonna take a life or death situation to get him to come around to aid Shanks, and even then, I think he's gonna need some convincing. That's where Usopp could come in. Simple, straightforward, easy to imagine. But that's as far as I'll go with predicting some concrete moment, mostly because I don't want to embarrass myself more than I already have. So I'll just say this. I think Oda has a moment planned in his head between Buggy and Usopp. I think there's a reason Usopp was the only OG Straw Hat not to meet the clown, and remains the only one with a direct connection to Shanks' crew. If there's one thing that both these characters represent, it's the average, down-on-his-luck guy. The loser who talks tough to make up for his own perceived inadequacies. In an imagined Elbaf arc, you'd have to assume being an honorable warrior is going to be a massive theme. What better part of the story could there be for these two to come nose to nose, potentially butt heads throughout, but push each other to grow in ways each could never have expected without the other. I could be dead wrong, but I believe the final developments for both characters will come, in part, from their destined meeting. What do you think? Am I completely crazy, or do you agree there's something more to these clown-ass pirates too? Please let me know any of your theories for how they could interact. Thanks so much for watching, and until the next time, I'll shut up.